Welcome to OOD Works, the podcast, a show about unique individuals and the services provided by Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, the state agency that helps individuals with disabilities find a job and be more independent. Here's your host, Kim Jump.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in today. In this episode of OOD Works, you will hear from the chair and vice chair of the OOD Council. The Council's role is to provide feedback to OOD on our Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation and Bureau of Services for the Visually Impaired programs. The members are appointed by the governor. Dr. Carolyn Peters of Dayton is the chair of the OOD Council. She is also a commissioner on the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. Dr. J.W. Smith of Athens is vice chair of the OOD Council. He is also an associate professor at Ohio University's School of Communication Studies. We discuss their journeys, the importance of being an advocate for others, and their direction for the OOD Council. Up first is Dr. Carolyn Peters. How did you first get connected with the agency? Was it known as Rehabilitative Services Commission at the time?
Yes. When I first started, I think it was in 2008 or 9. I'm not sure. But I was going through a process of losing my vision and, still being employed. Then it came to a point, I think it was in 2006, that I was really diagnosed as legally blind. And after that, I continued to work, but I was struggling. So I think it was in 2008 that I had an opportunity to visit with OOD, which was RSC then,
Yeah.
and became involved in that way, trying to job search and see how I could redefine my skills. And I had been a social worker for, so many years that basically that was all that I was doing. So we, went through that, brief challenge there. And then losing my vision, I was first very depressed about it. Then I was in denial. I went through all those stages, and finally realizing that there were some opportunities with, some rehabilitation, that I began to start attending meetings. We had local meetings at the time, which now are state meetings, which gave me an opportunity to be around other individuals, not just that were blind, but had other disabilities. It gave me a better understanding of, what it was really like and how to manage it, and how others were, kind of challenging those barriers that were before them. And as a result, ended up advocating. Got involved with I think his name was Robinson, or I can't remember now, but he was over the local chapter, and he worked for the state. And I got involved in some programs with the education department. There was an opportunity to apply for a grant where there were 25,000 applicants, and they narrowed it down to 2,500. And then it was down to 25 people that were selected across the United States. And I was one of those individuals. Wow. And that was all because of OOD, at the time RSC. And I saw the potential that there was something else that I could do. And, I continued to try to look for employment, could not find things that I was interested in, and then decided I can be an advocate. And then when we changed over, we decided to not have the local representation, and it was state. So I applied for that, and as a member, I became a very studious member, tried to learn the process and understand what was going on. And then in a couple of years, I was chairing the committee for CAC. and then we had the governor's council and the commissioners. So it's been a learning experience going throughout the agency, learning the processes that individuals must go through, and how to manage yourselves while you're going through it. And it was challenging. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, after I decided to retire, there was some recommendations made, and I don't know if I can share this, but I will.
Yeah, please.
I had, basically given up on trying to find employment. So I decided, well, I can advocate for other people, and that's what I chose to do. And you never know who's watching you, mm-hmm. and watching the work that you do. And I had resigned myself to being of service. So I was being observed. Kevin Miller, Director Miller, had an opportunity to talk about me to the governor, and as a result, made a recommendation to the governor when this position came about for the House Civil Rights Commission. And of course, like anything else, we can always recommend people, but that person has to, carry that weight if they're mm-hmm. going to get the job or whatever. So I was so grateful for the recommendation. And then going through the process, I was able to advocate for myself. And being a blind individual, the governor was very, instrumental in placing me with the House Civil Rights Commission. I talked with the chair of the commission, and the next thing I know, I was being appointed. Yeah. So, my whole point is I want to be an influence on people, and I want to impact people. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so very important, because a lot of blind people feel that, they're the last to be hired, the last to be cared about, and it may be that way for some people. They may feel that way for whatever reasons. But for those that feel inspired to, make that challenge and do something for themselves, I want them to know that it can be done. A lot of times things do take time, but we have to redefine what it is that we want to do and what our purpose is going to be in life.
And you had to do that personally.
Oh, yes. Like I said, I'm no different from anybody else. And actually, working as a licensed social worker and a master's licensed social worker in the state of Ohio, I had many opportunities. I was the state president for the National Association of Social Workers, and nationally, I was the chair for all the presidents across the United States, international, and Guam. Guam was a chapter in formation under my leadership. And to do all those things and then face the possibility of never seeing again, that was devastating to me. Yeah. It sent me in a big depression, all those things that come with it. Mm-hmm. And, we're talking about a loss here.
When your disability began to form for you, were you at the peak of your career kind of at that same time?
You know what? Kind of, and I was kind of coming down from it in a way, because I think I was about 55 years old. And I'm thinking, I've done all these things, I've been blessed with all these different skills. And then when blindness came upon me, I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And, it's like anything else, you can go to a doctor to, get some remedies for them to practice medicine on you, but you can't practice on yourself.
Right.
And, I found that to be really challenging for me, because no one in my family had experienced blindness. Mm. There may have been a couple people that wore glasses. So there was another barrier that I had to go through. And doing all those things, I'm thinking, what in the world, what can I do? Nobody could answer this question for me. And of course, then I started relying on my faith. Mm-hmm. And I was legally blind. I mean, I couldn't see. Right. I had lost 5 lines of vision in my left eye, and my right eye had collapsed after the surgery I had. So I decided to go back and get my doctorate degree. And of course, there were a lot of naysayers. Why would you want to, get a doctorate degree and you're losing your sight, And I'm thinking, I need to do this for me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to develop my faith. I thought I was strong enough, but evidently I wasn't. So I decided to do that. And
like
then,
an act of faith.
I tell you, I needed it. And then I had to take Greek and Hebrew. And I thought, oh no, I'm not in for this part of it. I got to learn Braille. I can't read Hebrew
Right.
and Greek as well. So I'm thinking, Lord, I don't know what I got myself into. So eventually, I had the assistance of OOD. I had been using Zoom text. So that helped me, master Hebrew and Greek, because the letters were different, and I was struggling to see with the, few lines of vision that I had. So I mastered that, got my doctorate degree, wrote my first book. After doing my dissertation, the people that interviewed me were saying, afterwards, you need to turn that thesis into a book. So that's what I did. And I, self-produced because I just wanted to get it out there, and didn't have the finances to really publish a book. But my point being, all those things, it took time.
Mm-hmm.
It took a long time for me to get to that point. But to even get my doctorate degree after losing my vision, at that point, I felt like I could do anything I wanted to do. And that's the attitude that I've had, the confidence that, going through all these processes had established in me. Trying to get my finances together, all those things. I mean, it was the challenge of a lifetime.
Sure. Yeah.
But to find that other individuals that were going through the same kind of things, that were struggling as well, and I found myself being that social worker again.
Mm-hmm.
I can help you. I can help you get to, from A to B, but you got to find your way to C. So, I started taking that attitude with people that I would come in contact with. And then I ended up just speaking all over the place, And people started looking at me when they wanted to hear about disabilities. Because my thought was, you can't not see me. My disability is visual, and I'm going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to stay home. I learned how to use public transportation. I learned how to use the Greyhound Transit Authority and also airplanes. The only thing I haven't traveled is on a train as of yet. But I managed to, get involved with other groups like the National Federation of the Blind. I developed my own support group, My Blindness and Me, with OOD's assistance and Goodwill Easter Seals. And I just go wherever I can, feel the need to be and try to help people along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And, I do a lot of phone calls, talking to people. They can be all across the country. It doesn't matter. If I can, give somebody some inspiration and some encouragement that I've been there. I know what it is. But you can't lay down forever. You got to get up, And that's something that my mother used to say to me,
You got to get up.
Got to get up. I mean, you down now, but don't be down for the count. Just get up, So, we've had struggles in the past. You're going to have them in the future. They are there. They're challenges. And that's the way I look at them. And I just knock them down when they get in my way.
Mm-hmm. And is that part of your message to others then?
Yes, it is. Because you can do anything that you want to do. But what that entails is preparedness. Mm-hmm. You got to be prepared. You got to know, what is it going to take for me to get from point A to B? If it's education, then how much when? And if it's for 4 years, what are you going to be doing in 4 years? So, you got to determine what's important for you and if you're willing to meet that challenge. And if you try it and it doesn't work, it's not successful, try something else. You just have to keep redefining yourself until you find it, find what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. And I think something else important that you touched on was time. That it's not just going to happen overnight for someone that does that planning, does that preparation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a lot of us, we may think we're capable of doing, multiple things, and we really aren't. Once you start a process, and it's, if you want to play the trombone, I know if your breathing's not good, your wind's not flowing right, it's gonna take time. You'll go through a lot of those little what they call them reeds or whatever they put on the trombones that you blow in. And, you're gonna get up 1,000 times and blow that trombone.
Right.
Before you get it right. So you got to be in for the long haul, and know that sooner or later it will end. You'll reach your goal, but you got to plan for it because otherwise you'll be disappointed along the way.
Right.
Even with mobility training, I thought that was a challenge in my life, and I was in denial for so long until I started falling. And I thought, well, I won't have any needs if I don't get this cane. So, you learn by trial and error.
Yeah.
And you have to accept what it is and what's not. I mean, it's a reality that I can't see like I used to see. And now the cane is my best friend. I wouldn't go anywhere without it. Because it's going to help me, visualize things that I cannot see myself. And then to have people around me all the time, even strangers. Strangers are not strangers if I need their eyes. And they can see and they can tell me, you get ready to walk into a hole or something. Yeah, I want you to speak up. But people need to see me. They need to see other people out there. And as a baby boomer, as they call us, we aren't going to be still. Transit authorities need to know that we're going to be riding. So prepare for us. Follow the rules of ADA and your conscience, your morals, whatever.
Yes.
Make it accessible to us. It's nothing to be afraid of. We want to be citizens that work and have a good living just like everybody else. And we can do those things, but we need to have access.
Dr. J.W. Smith, it's a pleasure. For you, being a person who's blind is different than some other people who are blind. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, well, first, I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. That will always be home. Spent 15 years of my life in Indiana, Gary, Indiana area. Did my bachelor's and master's there. So I didn't really discover the rehabilitation process until I was in high school and in the state of Indiana. I went from the state of Indiana to Michigan to do my PhD work. Never got involved much with rehab stuff in Michigan. Back to Indiana for my first job, and then to Ohio. For me, visual impairment suggests some vision. Because you can be legally blind. You can have some sight. But I was just trying to make the distinction that I am totally blind, and that distinction is significant in my experiences.
Yeah. How was that growing up?
It was my individual experience. I mean, I had a great family. I was mainstream. I didn't go to school for the blind, so I went through that experience. I had a great childhood. Had a great, it was great. It was, it's all I know. So I don't know what it means to be visually impaired. All I know is total blindness. The biggest misunderstanding from my perspective is that the lack of sight does not, denote darkness or lack of awareness. It's a sighted world. I mean, let's face it, it's a visual sighted world. And I think people rightly assume that if they lost their sight, that it would just be the worst thing ever. And I'm not saying that it won't be tremendous and traumatic, but it need not be the end of the world. And I think it can be summed up in that phrase that I'm sure was uttered and is uttered by a sighted person. That phrase that says, the eyes are the window to the soul. But think about that statement. What does that suggest? Does that say if I have no eyes, I have no soul? Or I need sight to have a soul? and sometimes I watch movies or I'll read a book and they'll talk about, I could see it in their eyes, and I could tell, I can't really trust a person that I can't see their eyes, and I'm like, wow, what do you do with somebody that doesn't fit that mold?
Right.
And I think a lot of times we dismiss them, we try to shut them out. It just bugs me so much when a sighted person tries to whisper to another sighted person about me or about something, as if I was like, what are you doing? Oh, you meet somebody and I'll hear somebody they'll say, like, is he blind? And it's like, oh my God. It's like,
do you whisper
it's like,
back?
what are you
Yes,
doing?
I am.
It depends on what day I'm having. It's like, I just ignore it most of the time, or sometimes I'm like, whatever. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
But I'm trying
that.
to be balanced, because I understand. I know it's traumatic if that's all you've known, but it's not the end of the world,
Right.
And you can, with proper training and the right attitude and support, man, you can have a wonderful life.
You have an amazing attitude. You just
Yeah,
every
right.
time I've seen you,
because I'm
you're just
happy.
so
Life is
positive.
good.
Yeah.
Life is good, and it's what you make it. And but again, I want to hasten to add, I don't want to come across as, I know I've been blessed, nobody's perfect. You have bad days, good days, etc. But it's attitudinal.
Yeah.
It really is. What are you going to do with the opportunities you have? What are you going to do with the challenges you've been presented with? That's what it really comes down to.
Is that your message to other individuals with
As
disabilities?
often as I can. That's right. That's exactly my message. I mean, if I had to boil it down, that's it.
Yeah. When you were a kid, did you ever think that you would be an advocate for others?
I did not. I don't think you think like that. No, I did not. This whole advocacy thing didn't really hit me until I'm so embarrassed, like in my 30s. I was just living my life and doing my thing, and then I joined this blind organization. I'm like, Jesus, I can't, there are people out there that need to hear my story or need me to go to bat for them. I'll tell you what happened. I had a friend I went to school with, and he was sheltered by his family, and they, really sheltered. I mean, they just wouldn't let that kid do anything almost. So the agency in Indiana, they said, we need to get him some independent living. So they got him away from his mom, which was traumatic, and he's in his 20s now, and got him an apartment a couple blocks away from the school I was going to, university. And, I walked home with him one day to his apartment to see it. And I was like, you're cool. You're, and just sitting there with him, I found out he couldn't do the basic things. He didn't know how to open a can. He had no concept of, how to shell a boiled egg, just basic stuff. And I'm like, wow. And so in a couple of weeks, I got to just show him some basic things that I had learned. I'm not the most, there's a lot more people, more independent people than I am, but based on where he was, I got to show him, like, hey, you can do this. You can do this. You can open that can. You can just do this. You can pour your own coffee.
Right, but no
you
one
can
had.
do that. Nobody had let him. So I know I'm sort of going off path a little, but that's when it started hitting me, like, advocacy is not just going to an OOD meeting or going to meet a counselor with somebody. It might be showing somebody, hey, you can put on your own socks.
Right.
You can pour your own coffee. You can walk down there to that mailbox.
So I know you've been familiar with some of the evolution with OOD over the years.
Right.
How would you describe how the agency has changed?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's gone through different iterations. Now, I've only been in the States since 1992. I mean, but others have born and raised here. So I got into what used to be called the Rehabilitation Services Commission for years. So I got involved when I was picked to serve on what was called then the State Consumer Advisory Council back in the middle 90s. I want to say 95. And I served there for 4 or 5 years. The agency was, at that time, run by, it was a state agency, but the state it had its own separate budget. It was run by these commissioners. I think it was 6 or 7 of them. They didn't report to the governor, or it was a huge budget, and Ohio was able to get away with that for years. So it made a difference. As you might expect, those commissioner jobs were well sought out. They were paid jobs, pretty good paying jobs, but a lot of politics involved to get appointed. So that impacted the agency. Basically, the agency was reporting to these commissioners. So you'd have these meetings, and these commissioners would come and have their meeting, and everybody was just trying to please these 7 commissioners, really. I mean, that's really what it was.
Because they reported to them.
That's right. They controlled, that's right.
Was it working, in your opinion?
I think it worked. There were some good days in the late 90s, early 21st century. Yeah, it was working, but I don't think it was working for Ohio. I don't think it was continuing to work for the nation. You understand? The nation was moving to other operations, other entities, and Ohio had to catch up. So when they finally, under the Strickland administration, put the budget under the state budget and made the director an appointee of the governor, woo, that was a big switch. No longer was it 7 guys who really got, I say guys meaning there were women too, who got appointed. Nobody ever really quite understood how those appointments happened. There was a lot of political stuff. But now the governor got to pick that person, and they were overseeing this $1 million entity. It changed the whole culture. It changed the whole thrust. But I think the biggest change for me, and there's still pros and cons about it, is when they changed the name.
Yeah.
For years, people didn't know what rehabilitation services was. They thought it was prison or all kind of other stuff. And I was like, I don't. So when they did this, let's change the name. And when they finally came up with this name, I just thought it was such a great idea. I know some people still like the old way. Some people don't like change. But I think this specific focus has been a good move. And people still are learning about us. Every month I find somebody who's never heard of the agency, didn't know they existed, didn't know there were services for them. Right. Just amazing.
It really is.
So the culture has really changed, and I think it's now more in line with national things, and then finally this SRC just sort of continues that step in the right direction. That's sort of my capsulized view of the sort of the evolution, at least from 1994 or 5, in my opinion.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to say too. I think the governor has really turned the spotlight on the agency, which turns the spotlight on us. I mean, from day one, when he signed this and wants to make Ohio, a national player here, that turns the spotlight both monetarily and visibility-wise on OOD and this council.
And what does that mean to you personally?
That means that we're gonna be expected to deliver. We're going to be expected to help push his initiative forward as much as possible. So the etiquette thing, great step in the right direction. So I want to be a part of that because that's a part of my role. Doing
exciting.
This podcast is a part of the role. We got to make ourselves available to help make his governor's decree a reality.
And the governor's initiative this year, one of them is to make sure that state agencies hire or look at hiring people with disabilities. And as the chair, I feel my duties and responsibilities lie for everyone with a disability in the state of Ohio. not just the blind, although I'm blind, and of course that is a primary concern for me, but I represent everyone. And I think with the council, after our first meeting, we had elections, and I was elected, and I appreciate that, and I feel that they trust that I will do my duty, and that's to represent everybody in the state of Ohio. Mm-hmm. And my biggest concern is the success of children. We don't want children to be dependent just on the government. I mean, it's a good thing to have disability, income, all those things. But we have children that can, do much, much more. They can have a regular income, and we want them to have that opportunity to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And be tax-paying citizens. Right. It's very important to have that kind of independence.
Right.
So we want to make sure that young people know that they, have access, and that, if that's what they want, if they want a job, then we're going to try to help you get a job. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to try to help you maintain that job. And if there are barriers, we need to know what they are. We don't want people to just quit and go away. Right. We want you, if you're going to quit, we want to know why. What could we have done, or what could you have done to maintain this job? It may be something that you figured out you just didn't like. Then again, redefine yourself. Mm-hmm. What is it that you think you might want to do? And we just keep, redefining the goal. You just don't stop.
Mm-hmm. And redefine is really, for me, the word that comes to mind for you. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're the perfect example of redefining yourself.
Oh yeah, it took a whole lot of redefining. It's just it depends on the individual. Like I said, it takes time, and people need to give themselves time to heal, because when you don't expect something and you lose something, you do grieve it. And we all grieve at different, intervals in our lives, and things come up and then things go away. But you learn how to manage it in the process. We are real people, and mm-hmm. we have your concerns at heart. We have our own concerns. The council is made up of mostly people with disabilities, or loved ones with disabilities, or they represent agencies that represent people with disabilities.
Right, great.
I've enjoyed this. Had a little fun.
Me too. Me too. Thank you again for
You're so welcome.
Agreeing to be on the show. We really appreciate it.
Loved it. Anytime.
A transcript of today's episode is available at ood.ohio.gov/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review. We're on social media at Ohio OOD. Do you have a disability? Do you want a job? We can help. OODworks.com.